Hi guys, and welcome to another edition of Leadership Revealed. So whether you're watching us on YouTube or you're listening on the podcast, thanks for tuning in. So today's special guest is a really good friend of mine, and I know people say when they interview somebody, he's a really good friend of mine, but Tom really is. We've known each other for a number of years. And Tom McGee runs a very good letting agency and estate agency in Tameside in Manchester. He's a Your Move franchise, and I've asked him to come on to the podcast and the YouTube channel just to have a bit of a chinwag, really, just talk about all things property, business, systems, processes, and Tom's quite gladly agreed to come on. So without further ado, welcome, Tom, and thanks again for coming on the Leadership Revealed podcast.
Hey, John.
How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks, mate. Are you?
Not bad. Do you know what? I think we should have subtitles on this because normally I'm the only northerner. I'm the token northerner, but you've come on. So I think we're double trouble, isn't it? Two northerners.
Yours is the only podcast that I still have to listen to on normal speed rather than 1.5 speed, just to slow you down.
Yeah, I know. Now I know that I'll really slow my voice down. So yeah, appreciate that. So Tom, is a bit of a way of your own introduction. I won't, introduce you too much and do you a disservice. Can you just tell our watchers, subscribers, listeners, followers, just a little bit about you and your business and where it's come from?
Yeah, definitely. So we've been in business since May 2007. As you quite rightly said, we're a Your Move franchise now. We were originally a Halifax estate agents franchise when that was a thing. We set up probably at the worst possible time ever to open an estate agent, so right before the credit crunch. But I actually always say to people, it was the best time to open because we didn't know any different, and it was a tough market from almost month one. But it meant we really had to sort of hit our strides and work really, really hard from the first moment. I say we because it's a family business. I'm in business with my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law, which can be interesting at times and can be great at times. I think depending on what day of the week you ask me, I'll either say it's the best decision I've ever made or the worst decision I've ever made. But more days probably saying the best, I would think.
Yeah. So it's quite interesting. You set up in May 2007. We set up in August 2008. And exactly the same. I always tell people that, if you can set up just before or as a crash is happening and you can ride and survive that, then when the good times occur, then great. For us, and it'll be interesting to get your thoughts on it. And as I say us, it was me at the time, but I've got a business partner now. It really made me focus on the really, really tough stuff. So like the finances and being very careful with my money and making sure every penny counted when it came to marketing. Was that the same with you?
Yeah, definitely. And we were very much conscious from literally month one, how much money is coming in every month and what do we have to pay out? And, even things like, again, showing my age, but the newspaper advert, were we getting a return on that investment? Could we do something different with that money? Should we be spending it on something else? And I think probably in fairness, as times have got better, we maybe haven't had that same level of concentration, and it becomes something where you sign up to something or you agree to try something from a marketing point of view, and you're not as focused on, well, is that bringing any money in? What are we getting out of it? Because there's just more money generally swimming around, so it's easy to start spending money on stuff without that same focused approach, I suppose. Yeah.
Do you find when you see all these new people starting up in the last 10 years, like post-crash, you almost feel like the elder statesman saying, the kids these days don't know how easy they've got it. When I was a lad and we had to go through a property crash, because that's how I look at it, it's only 12, 13 years, but I really think it makes you much more business savvy to having gone through that crash.
Definitely, I'd 100% agree. And I think also as well, just purely from an estate agency point of view, we've got staff who worked for us for a couple of years who've never really consistently had to talk to owners about reducing the price because everything has been selling as long as you're sort of bringing it on at a realistic price. Whereas back in the day, we were bringing stuff on at a realistic price, and 2 weeks later, it was no longer a realistic price, And I think, those tough conversations and having to ring somebody up and saying, well, since we last spoke 2 weeks ago, I've had nobody else interested in your property. And I know I told you when we reduced the price a month ago that would get it sold, but we're probably going to have to reduce the price again. It made you much more confident to have those difficult conversations with vendors, because actually you realise it's not going to be as bad as you think it is. So now when we get sort of someone who gets an offer of 98% of the asking price and people are like, oh, they're going to be a bit upset, it's a complete different ball game in terms of conversations, you know.
Were you always sales, or did you start off? Oh, you've
so
started.
we were 100% sales for the first 5 years of our business.
Really?
Yeah. So we had to, even in a difficult market, we had to make sales work because we had no rental income to come back to. I think that was one of the problems that the Halifax had, is they didn't do rentals. So when the market went bad, they had no sort of residual income every month to fall back on. And then, even if we're being honest, even then when we started doing rentals and lettings, we did it half-heartedly. You know, we sort of suddenly we were transferred from a Halifax estate agent franchise to a Your Move franchise. It became something that was on the table for us to do, and we went into it. But it was very much more, if we had a house where the owner said they changed their mind about selling, we would bring up the subject of renting. And we grew a small portfolio over a couple of years. And then about 4 years ago, we really thought, actually, we need to take this seriously. And we've really sort of put some resource and some time and some effort into it since then.
It's interesting, isn't it, that there's a lot of estate agents had to get into lettings to be able to survive, the crash. But even now, lettings is still looked upon, not by you guys, obviously, but by a lot of estate agents, as the poor cousin, the poor relation of the overall property industry. Why do you think that? Because for me, it's because there's so much legislation. I don't think it's looked upon. Two things. I think it doesn't generate as much income. So I think that's why. And people see it as a lot of work for not a lot of income. And they discount the fact that the actual value of a full service estate agency is actually not necessarily in the sales, but it's in the lens, because it's a residual income. It's that reoccurring monthly income.
Yeah, and I think for me as well, I think if people were being honest, a lot of estate agents think it's beneath them to take the call about a blocked gutter or whatever it may be, and they sort of they like the income coming in, but they resent in my opinion, they resent the tenants, and they resent the sort of the day-to-day management of the properties. You know, it's an inconvenience.
It's not sexy, is it? Dealing with repairs.
But
selling like a £10 million house, that's a lot sexier than like you said, dealing with broken boilers. So what winds you up about the industry? What really gets under your skin at the minute with agents?
So I think
you're allowed to swear.
Yeah, about the industry at the moment is, I just see, I'm in a lot of the Facebook groups. I like to try and contribute, and there's just so much bullshit out there that other people are spouting. Either that they've got this solution to everyone's problems, and if you sign up for their tech product, it's going to do everything, including brush your teeth in the morning and everything. Or people are saying, oh yeah, I only charge 2% fees, when we all know that that's not the case. Or they're sort of posting on, it's almost this sort of cliche of the Bentley and the Rolex that they've rented for the weekend to do some post on social media. And I think the difficulty is that other people are watching that and they're believing it, and they're comparing their agency and their performance and what they think other people are achieving to the not to the reality, but to the perception. And it's not healthy for people, I don't think.
No, I agree. I mean, there was a post on a group that I run, and there was a couple of people said we won't take any less than 2%. And I've told this story a couple of times. So my cousin lives in the area that one of these agents operates. So I'm not going to mention any names because I think it's a bit of a dickhead move to do that. And they said they charge 2%. So I got my cousin to phone them up, and they immediately dropped the pants at 1.25, because my cousin's got the same accent as where this person is. And they immediately dropped the pants at 1.25%. And the parting thing was, we'll price match anyone else. So meaning we will go even lower. And the other person who said 2%, they came in at 1.5% without even negotiating. And my cousin, with all the greatest respect in the world, isn't a property professional, isn't a negotiator, he's a housewife. And I'm sure if it was you or I, we'd have got them down even further. So that is bullshit that's going on in the forums. And I do think that there's a lot of people that like to give it the big one. So, I mean, you've been on my group before. I'll openly say when we screwed up. I'll openly say that when we first started, we had really bad customer service. We didn't have systems. We lost staff, because we didn't look after them back in the beginning. Our recruitment policy used to be, do you like property? Yes. Do you want a job? Yes. You start tomorrow. But I think it's healthy to have that level of self-regulation, self-awareness of where you were and where you are now. And it does wind me up a little bit when you see people who are selling courses or the coaches or the mentors. And that's fine. I'm one, and I'm not saying slagging them down so I'm the only guy. But I think you need to have that little bit of open and honesty and say, look, this might work in London. This might work in the big city centre places. It won't work in Easington. It won't work in Tameside. It will not work in Wigan, where Alan Batt is. Alan's a good agent, and I think I was talking to somebody else today, and they were saying that his competitor next door or 2 doors or 3 doors away is charging like 500 or 600 quid to sell a house. How do you compete with? How can you go in at 2% of a 400 grand house with that?
And if you are, great, and we have competitors who are maybe not 500 quid, but they're certainly 650, 750 on a no sale, no fee basis. And we're obviously significantly more expensive than that. And hopefully we win our fair share of the business by showing the value that we bring to the table and the fact that we're going to do things in a different way, which will generate a better result. But you also have to be aware that there's always going to be somebody who shops in Aldi and somebody who shops in Waitrose, and you're not going to be the right agent for everyone. And especially in the market that we're in at the moment, we've got something like 95% of our stock is sold subject to contract. Vendors are saying to us, but if I put it on with anyone, it will sell. And they're right. So the key for us is to say, yeah, but we'll get you more money, or we'll provide you with a better service, or we'll do something that those other agents won't do. But not everyone's going to believe that, and not everyone's going to be motivated by that. And other people are just going to say, to a certain extent, you're all going to do the same, so I'm going to go with the cheaper agent. And that's not a problem. They're welcome to that decision. There's enough people who will pay the higher amount for us to carve out a good chunk of the market at decent fees. And that's what we've just got to focus on,
Have you thought about a performance fee?
Yeah. And we're sort of, we do a lot of things. So we do sort of, we do some performance fees. We do some flexible fees where we sort of say to the owner, we will agree to match the fee that the other agents quoted. But if you feel at the end of the process, actually, we've really smashed it out of the park in terms of service and in terms of the process, then you'll agree to pay us either the fee that we're asking for or somewhere in between. I'm less keen on that because it's hard to predict your income, because it's very much reliant on what are they going to say on the day.
And the honesty of the vendor as well.
Yeah, exactly. And also, you can be let down by things like the solicitor at the last minute delaying exchange by a week, and then they're pissed off, and so therefore they reflect that in the fee. But we do sort of performance fees where if we get you X, you pay us Y, or if we get you X, you pay us 10% of everything above X, and things like that. And I think in the current market that makes sense, because if you're confident in what you're doing, then the agents are going to, the vendors, the clients are going to listen to that, and they're going to respond to it.
Yeah, I had a good chat with a client of mine, James Kendall, really, really good guy, really switched on guy. And if they do that, they call it an overage fee. I quite like the performance fee. I think our clients in the Northeast would understand that a lot better. And then I was talking to Sam at Home Search. He's a really good guy. And he said that was a big thing over in Oz. And he's a big fan of that. So we're just starting to put that into our marketing. And I think it was sensible what you said in this market. And you've got to take it that you couldn't do this in a flat market, because you're not going to get 100% or 102 or in some cases 110%. There was one of our latest acquisitions that we put on, it was 850 grand. And it looks as though we're going to probably get about 865, maybe 87 for it, potentially. We've got a few people. It hasn't closed at the minute. And, we're quite lucky that we charge 1.25% of this particular brand, because it's been doing it for ages. But if we got it at 1%, right, which is your 8 grand, we could say, right, well, 25% of whatever we get above and beyond that. If that goes for 870, that's going to be an additional 5K, or whatever it is. So that's a big, big sort of boost to your original fee. But it looks as though you're price matching your competitors.
And you're making it easier for them to make the decision to go with you,
Yes.
aren't you? Ultimately, I don't do the valuations for the branch as much as I used to, but the favourite question I would always ask everybody is, if everybody was charging the same, who would you pick?
Yeah,
and if the answer isn't you, the fee is irrelevant at that point, right? But if the answer is you, then all you are doing is negotiating on your price, because you've already established your value to them, and then you just need to make it easy to choose you by having a performance fee or a flexible fee, or if you need to do a deal, then you need to do a deal, but it's about just establishing, would they pick you if you were the same price anyway? Because if they wouldn't, well, you need to go back for round 2 of the conversation, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Quick question. Mm-hmm. Do you think we have got enough, or too many, just the right amount, or good quality trainers, coaches, mentors, facilitators, gurus, call them what you want, in the UK?
So the answer to that is going to be 100% no. And the reason for that is purely and simply, is there 20,000 estate agency branches in the country? Let's say an average of 4 to 5 people working in a branch. So you've got somewhere between 80 and 100,000 people working in the industry. And I'm pretty clued up on trainers, and I reckon I could name maybe 8 off the top of my head. Mm-hmm. So you've got 1 trainer per 10,000 people in the industry.
Yeah.
And maybe there are more than 8. I'm sure there are. But the point being is, well, people aren't getting regular training on that level of quota, are they? And I think actually one of the things that's been interesting over the last sort of 14 months is, the sort of enforced changes because of coronavirus have meant things like, if we wanted to send somebody on training, we might have to send them down to London for a day, but it's not just sending them down to London for the day. It's either a hotel the night before, and it's the train ticket cost and everything else. So, even a sort of a pretty basic training day becomes an expensive investment comparatively in a staff member. But we had a guy yesterday who did a morning Zoom session with one of my staff, and he was back in work at 1 o'clock. Basically, so we've not had to give up a whole day. He's not had to travel, so the investment became much more affordable for us because of that, effectively, and then I think there's things like Charlotte Campbell's doing with Able Agent, and I know Kerfuffle with Julian O'Dell have got these sort of online video libraries of training that people can dip in and out of. So hopefully things are going to become a bit more accessible, because the standard in the industry is pretty poor, isn't it? And that is because of a lack of training. And we've been guilty of that in the past, I think, sometimes. We've taken staff members on, we've trained them internally to a standard of, well, you're able to go and sit on the front desk without getting us arrested, or, a huge fine. And then we've let them plateau, and really what we needed to do is kicking the training up to another level, and then kicking the training up to another level. But it's almost just, well, you're good enough, so that will do. And I think, we're not the only ones who've done that in the past. I'm sure that there's plenty of people listening and watching who've made those sort of mistakes.
Tom, I can categorically say that, I talk to hundreds and hundreds of agents, and you just tell by certain responses on the various forums, not necessarily, agency growth strategies, but other forums, that they don't train their staff as much as they should. And they know that. And that's the good, if you can take a positive out of it, as people, you're known for your honesty. In fact, I think I said, was it yesterday or the day before, you posted something and I went, oh, great honesty. And that's a massive positive trait, because a lot of agents will gloss over it and they use the excuse, I haven't got time. I tell my coaching clients, I'll never accept I haven't got time as an excuse for not doing your accountability. Because if I'll say to you, what time did you get up? 7. Well, why didn't you get up at 6? What time did you go to bed? 9. Why didn't you go to bed? What did you do at the weekend? Oh, we had a glass of wine. The pubs are open. No, that's fine if you don't want to do that, but don't come with the bullshit excuse of time. Because what it should be, I did have the time, I just didn't prioritize it. And that's the same in business, is that if you're running around like a blue-ass fly, that's a northern phrase for all the southerners listening, and you put that, collecting the rent or twisting the morning, taking a complaint off a landlord is more important than training, developing your staff so that they can pay the rent or that they can deal with the complaint, then that's fine. but you've got to place importance on the training development of your staff, because everyone thinks I'm a systems guy. I'm not. I'm a people guy. I think people are by far head and shoulders more important than systems, because if you have the right people, they will write the systems for you that they should follow.
And I think the thing for me is, and referring back to the post that you were talking about, so we were talking about why maybe you don't have a systemized business that runs itself, and why I'm still 14 years later working in the branch.
Yeah.
And for me, we've trained staff, but we've done that individually one-on-one with people. So we've got Joe Bloggs, and Joe Bloggs is brilliant at the job, and they do it exactly the way we want them to do, but then they leave. And then we've got to go through that process again, and we've never systemized, documented, put processes into place so that when Joe Bloggs' replacement comes in, they know exactly what Joe Bloggs would do in that situation. You know, so you then have to retrain them. And I think that sometimes we've retrained them to the same standard, and sometimes what we've done is we've sort of let our standards slip slightly, and then we've had to sort of almost go back to square one with the staff and the branch and the way we want things to be done, because once you let something slip a little bit in one area, it becomes the thing that happens in every area, doesn't it? And you get that roller coaster of customer service and performance and results and everything else, you know?
Do you think agents are bad at prioritising, good at excuses, or lazy, or a bit of everything?
I think probably a bit of the first two. I don't think there's many lazy agents. I think a lot of people are working hard. They're just not working smart, are they? You know, and I know that's a cliche, but
it's true.
You know, I think it's very easy to come into the branch and do busy work every single day. Whether that's, there's a load of Rightmove leads, so I'll jump in and help the frontline staff deal with those, or there's somebody complaining, or we're short on valuation, so I'm going to hit the phone and do some prospecting, and all of that is valuable and useful stuff to do. But in the meantime, that process of, well, I need to work on the strategy of how we're going to grow into this other area, or to develop the processes, or do some training, is put to one side, and you come home at the end of the day and say, I'm exhausted, I worked really hard today. And you did work really hard, but maybe not in the right areas, and maybe not on the things that will grow that business. And again, only speaking from personal experience, I can tell you now, for a vast chunk of the 14 years we've run a business, we've not really had any sort of annual or quarterly plan as such. It's been, make it, January the 1st, let's make as much money as we possibly can this year. And of course, that's definitely the aim, and we've worked hard all year to do that. But we've never said, well, how are we going to grow the number of properties we sell? Or, actually, that's not true to say we've never said it. We obviously regularly say that, but we've never sat down and said, right, quarter one's aim is we're going to target this area, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to work really, really hard on creating a prospecting culture, or whatever it may be. And then in quarter two, we're going to move on to this, and and have a proper plan with action points and milestones and things like that. Now, in the last couple of years, we've changed that, and that's definitely had an impact on how we run as a business, you know.
Sort of taking it back a little bit, how come you got into business with your mother-in-law and your brother-in-law? And leading on from that, why a franchise and not set up your own business?
So I'll probably answer the second one first. The franchise was a pretty easy decision for us. My mother-in-law was an existing branch manager of the Halifax estate agents, and the Halifax approached her and said, do you want to franchise the branch that you manage and effectively continue to run the branch you manage, but keep the lion's share of the income? And I'd worked for her previously. I was working for a different estate agency at the time. And so that was a pretty easy decision for us to make. If I'm being truthful, how did I end up in business with my mother-in-law and brother-in-law? Just fell into it. Yeah, because I worked in a estate agency. I'd sort of, and she was offered this opportunity, and she sort of said, this seemed like a good opportunity. Is it something that you want to do? And I said, yeah, definitely, because I was entrepreneurial in nature, and I wanted to earn more money than I think that I could see I could earn as an employee. And I was in my sort of mid-20s, and it seemed like a great idea. And if I'm being honest, I had nothing to lose. And then at the same time, Mary's other daughter, her husband, was at a crossroads in his career, and it just seemed to make logical sense that we would all sort of give this a go, basically, you know. And as I say, in many ways, it's been a really, really great decision to be in business with each other. In most ways, I would say. I think that we've discussed this before, and I've said it's great because you're working towards, in theory, a common goal of building something for the family, and you've got people who are there to support you, who sort of love and care for you, not just as a business partner, but as a member of the family and stuff like that. I think the issue that we've had with it is that because we're a family business and there's 3 family members that work in here, and sometimes 4, because sometimes my wife works with us as well. What you create is you create a family culture within the business. And again, when we look at it now with hindsight, that wasn't the culture that we wanted, that we should have set up. Yeah. I say to people, what we wanted is a sports team culture, where you come in, everyone's mates, everyone's worked really hard together towards that common goal. But as soon as somebody becomes not capable of performing at the standard, it sounds harsh to say, but ruthlessly you replace them with somebody else who is capable of performing at the standard. And when you have a family culture, that doesn't happen. What happens is you forgive them, and you make allowances for them, and you work around them. And that's not necessarily the family members. It just becomes anyone in the branch, or anyone in the team, or however you want to say it, because you have this close culture of everyone's part of the family here, And now we used to say that a lot, and I hear other businesses, and I see other businesses say it now, and I think that is not what you want, because the problem is that although it sounds great, it creates problems in the long term.
You make allowances. There's a really good book, Legacy. It's about the All Blacks.
Yeah, brilliant book. Yeah,
it's superb. I mean, I'm a huge rugby nerd anyway, so I love that. But one of the things I like, what they talk about is the self-policing aspect of it. Mm-hmm. If somebody's not performing, you're sharp about it, and you feel guilty but in a family-run business, you've got to make allowances. Oh, look, we know what's going on in the personal life, or Jimmy split with his wife, or whatever, and we'll let it go. But again, then you've got the non-family members saying, well, my route for progression are blocked because there's no way that Tom's going to sack his mum or his brother-in-law. He can't. So where do I go from here? Do you find that it affects the other family, the other staffing, or are they quite understanding about it, or you haven't had that?
I think there's definitely, especially the route to progression, I think there's definitely been issues with that in the past. And I think we've had good staff members who've moved on because they can't see, they can't, or they couldn't see a path for development and a path for them to go somewhere else. And I think it's also, as I say, we've had staff who've worked for us for sort of 10 years at various stages, and they've very much become part of the family. And when I got married, all the staff came to the wedding, and there's nothing wrong with that, and that's great. But it then becomes a sort of thing where if you've been playing with somebody's kids at the weekend, it makes it very, very difficult to say to them on Tuesday, you're not performing to standard. Because the implications of where that conversation is going to go ultimately, and I think that, as I say, that to me is the downside of being a family business. And I suppose, if I'm being honest, it's not necessarily that it should be a downside of it being a family business. It's just something that I think when you set up a family business, you have to be acutely aware of, and you have to be aware that's where the culture can go if you don't police it.
What's been the biggest learning curve for you in the business? Where do you think that over the last couple of years, especially, that you've said, you know what, from either a course or the forums, this is where we need to change and take the business, and you've actually done something about it? Because it's all well and good, just sort of give you a bit of context, it's all well and good reading the books and watching the YouTube videos, but it's actually, as everyone knows, you especially, it's action that you need to take rather than just talking about it.
So I suppose for me, there's 2 massive things that we've looked at. The first was just the standards that we operated at, and we, I've said this before, we have at various times been really, really good as an estate agency. I think it's probably fair to say, the experience that people have had with us has been, I think absolutely exceptional. And then at times it hasn't been, and that's almost always to do when we sort of analyse why that's happened. It's almost always to do with us letting certain things slip, and because we've let, and they're not necessarily massive things, but because we've let little things slip, right? That people have then sort of looked around and thought, oh, well, we don't have to do things the way they're saying they should be done. And then that becomes something that happens in more and more areas. And so for me, the biggest thing that we didn't do as a business that we are now doing more frequently is the one-to-one conversations with the staff, right? Because then you can sit there and say, well, look, you started coming in a little bit late. And whilst it's not a massive issue that you're 5 minutes late, to me, it's an indicator of your attitude towards other things, or your desk is starting to get a little bit messy. Although if any of my team hear this, they'll laugh because I am definitely the messy desk guy in the office. But it's whatever we've decided are the standards, or just how we certain things that we do. When we going on a valuation or when we're going on a viewing, and the process that we've agreed it should be. You're not following that process. And what we're finding is when we're having those conversations early, that's very easy to nip it in the bud. Or somebody sort of turns around and says, well, that process is stupid. That's why I don't want to follow it. And then there's a conversation to be had of, well, is it stupid? And actually, why didn't you just tell us that's what you thought? And maybe we'll change the process. Or, well, there's a reason we do it. And you either follow what we want to do, or you don't. And if you don't, that's absolutely fine, but maybe we're not the right place for you. And, by having those more regular conversations, and I'll be honest with you, we're not as structured as, I've done a training course with you about managing staff, and I know how you manage your guys at Castledean, and we're probably not as structured as you are, and probably not as structured as we should be in that process, but we're now at least having the regular conversations and identifying areas where people are letting the standards slip, and to be fair, praising them as well when they're doing things well, and giving them that feedback either way, I suppose. So that's the first thing that we've implemented in the last couple of years that I think is making a difference. And then for me, the second thing is what I said previously, is just a bit more planning and a bit more structure. We've got a 5-year goal for the business. We've got a 1-year goal for the business. We've got some quarterly actions that we want to complete, and we're having we have maybe not quite as formal as we might do if it wasn't a family business, but we now have more of a manager, director, owner style conversation, which is much more formal than, oh, can you pass me the gravy? And by the way, what do you think we should do about this? Which is perhaps what we've done in the past. Again, we're sort of carving out a little bit of time once a month to say, what have we got issues? What do we need to improve on? What's going really well? Are we on track for what we want to do, or do we need to make any changes and things like that?
Do you know what's really interesting about this is that the things that you're doing now are going to make it easier to run on a day-to-day basis, and it's going to make it certainly easier to run in about a year's time. But what also it's going to do, and by the way, I'm not prying if you don't want to talk about it, that's completely fine, is if and when you want to exit the business. I'm listening to an absolute ton of stuff on acquisitions because we're going through the process, I do the courses, etc. on it. And one of the things is that family-run businesses, or especially where people are in roles that, say 20 or 30% of family, it's pretty much unsaleable, because if you sell it, and 30% of the staff go, then it's a bit difficult. But what I suppose you can do, and your mother-in-law's a little bit older, is that she could be looking to exit the shares, and then the brother-in-law, or you sell to the brother-in-law, and then it's 1 or 2 people you've got to replace. It's actually quite smart what you're doing, is you're putting these things into place now and making 1 or 2 of you redundant. So if I came in and, we went into Manchester, you could say, JP, by the way, although we've got shareholders, 2 of them have got nothing to do with the business, there's only me, so there's only me you've got to replace. Is that like part of the overall plan? Yeah,
I mean, I think there's definitely an element of that plan, and whilst we may not have any immediate plans to exit, you've got to start thinking about those sort of things eventually, don't you? And I think there's definitely an element of wanting to make all of us redundant. But I think coming back to something that we've spoken about in the past, I think it also fits in more with where we think the industry is going. So we used to have 2 branches. Prior to COVID, we shut straight after COVID, we shut a branch because when we came back, we didn't know what the market was going to be like. So we sort of said, look, we're temporarily going to be based out of just this one office. For a variety of reasons to do with the lease of the property, what the landlord of the property wanted to do, the success that we'd had being based back in one office, we made a decision to permanently shut that branch about 3 months ago. But for us, what it allowed us to do is then say, well, if we are going to shut that, what's the plan? Does that mean we're just going to be one branch forever, or what are we looking at doing? And for me, obviously, there's a lot of talk in the industry about self-employed models and hubs and associates and things like that. And I've my opinions on some of it, and some of it I think is again goes back to that what we're talking about before about people bullshitting, and maybe this stuff isn't quite as rosy as everyone says it is. But I do think that is probably the long-term direction that as an industry we're going to go, and certainly as a business that we're going to go, is that we want to look at, are we going to be having one bigger branch covering a much bigger area than traditionally it would have done, and maybe have 4 or 5 valuers within a branch who are more of all-round estate agents, and our job as the industry, our job will be to provide support to those people. So somebody who's going to answer the phone really, really professionally, who's going to register the applicants or whatever really, really professionally, and maybe provide some sales progression. And then it's that middle ground, which is going to be some sort of element of high commission or self-employed or something. And that's the vague area, I think, for everybody at the moment, isn't it? Do you sort of have people who are self-employed, or do you employ them and give them a big chunk of the commission, but sort of expect them to bring in the business themselves? But that's definitely where we see ourselves moving towards, which is why we want to get some processes in place and also some systems in place, so that we're very much focused on providing that front end service and that back end service, and then the people in the middle can almost run independent businesses within our business, if you like.
Yeah, it's a bit like a hub and spoke model, isn't it?
Definitely.
No, I like that. I think that's got legs, and it's a bit of a hybrid between, like, you've got the self-employed model, and I think there's one, possibly two, self-employed agents. Well, definitely, there's only one as far as I'm aware, who's probably the market leader in certain areas. Other than that, you've got all these self-employed models where some of them are just scraping a living. And you've got the high-profile ones, and they fit the niche, and they're very good, and that's fine. And part of the argument is that you don't do self-employed if you want to be a market leader. It's more of a lifestyle more than anything else. But yeah, again, you're not. It's getting the wheat from the chaff, isn't it? It's spinning out the bullshit of what works and what doesn't work. Because let's be honest, they're in business to sell licenses or franchises or sell areas or whatever, the spoke of the hub and spoke. They're not going to say, oh, by the way, it doesn't work in this area and this and this. And you get good and you get bad as with any industry. So no, it's interesting. So where do you think, in general, that's where the industry's headed in your area? Where do you think it's headed in the UK? Has COVID made a huge impact on that? Do you think it's sped up where we're going to be going?
Yeah, I think it definitely has. I mean, it's like we were talking about with training and the changes to how that's been. And I think, COVID, it's got to have impacted on lots of people's businesses, even if they're not seeing that now, because I think that there's a number of things that have happened. So I think that maybe some staff members have realised they're not as essential to the running of the business as they thought they were. I think some business owners have realised that they don't necessarily need to have the same number of premises and the same number of staff that they thought they needed to generate those results. And I think that sort of feeds into that hub and spoke or self-employed conversation that we've had. But I also just think that the customers' expectations are changing. We used to do, I would say, 90% of our viewings at the weekend, and now do most of our viewings sort of late afternoon, early evenings during the week. And it's not to say we don't do viewings on a Saturday, because we do, but most of our customers are now moving away from that expectation of the Saturday is going to be the day that we're going to go view the house. And that might sound like a little difference, but that actually makes a big difference to the industry, because then if in terms of the caliber of staff that you're attracting, if you're no longer having to say, well, everyone works every other Saturday, if it's now going to be 1 in 3 Saturdays because customers' expectations have changed, or because they're now working more flexibly from home, they can view at different times, then actually that changes who might be attracted to the industry and the caliber of who you can recruit, and then becomes like a virtuous cycle of better staff. People's experiences are better, and then hopefully the fees can rise a little bit, and things like that. So, and I think connected to that is obviously this sort of Roper situation, which is hanging over everyone's head a little bit at the moment. But again, licensing and compulsory training can only help the industry, and I think what will happen as part of that is you will see people leave the industry either because they just can't be bothered going through that training process, or because they don't want to be licensed and compliant and things. And again, that can only be a positive for the industry, I think.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. We took over a business just before COVID, and their tagline was "Nobody opens longer hours than us." And it was 9 in the morning or 9 at night, Saturdays, Sundays, overflow contact calls. Immediately we shut down on a Sunday, and immediately we shut down from, I think it was like till 6 o'clock on a Saturday, and we just went down to 1 o'clock, and we still sold more houses. So I think, it's great to have it open until, there's an argument, why don't we have it open till 4 o'clock in the morning? Because there's somebody going to be finishing night shift at midnight. And I think it's like what Henry Ford said, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they'd ask
faster horses. Yeah.
And it's the same as that. If you, do you want to start open at midnight? Yeah, do it. No, you tell them your opening hours, and if they want the house that bad, they will come to you. If they want, they'll phone you and say, look, I can't get there till 5. Can you keep it open till 5:30? Alan Bat, we mentioned him before, the Batman down in Wigan, he was open Saturdays and Sundays, and he shut down on a Sunday, and I'm sure he didn't feel any itch, because it's just that old thought of, well, this is what the customer wants, this is what the customer needs. Well, it's up to you to tell the customer what they should want, because you're the person, the industry expert. So I think the industry's changing. I think it's going to be for the better. We're using more technology. I think it's forced us to be more efficient, which leads us to more effective. So I think I think overall we're in a good position as an industry, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Tom, I just want to say thanks very much for coming on here. I just want a signature question I ask everybody at the end is, what is leadership to you? What do you think leadership is?
So I think for me, leadership is about having a plan, and it's about having a destination in mind, and then it's about bringing people along that journey to that destination. And it's not necessarily about cracking the whip and standing at the front of a room and giving an inspiring speech and shouting at people, but it's about just sort of saying, this is where we want to go and this is how we're going to get to it. Leading by example, really showing people, you're prepared to go on that journey with them to get to where they want to be.
I appreciate that. Tom, one of the nicest men in the state agency. Thanks again for coming on the podcast and YouTube.